My name is Sloane, and am 26 years old. I came home from a double shift at the hospital, exhausted down to my bones, only to find my driveway completely empty. My Subaru Outback, the car I'd saved for 2 years to buy, the symbol of every sacrifice I'd made to build something that was mine, was gone. Panic flooded through me as I grabbed my phone to call the police, but then a text from Mom lit up my screen. It read exactly this. "Don't worry, honey. Your brother needed a car for his new job interview. You understand, right? You're always so capable." I stood there frozen, phone trembling in my hand, as a rage I'd never felt before started building in my chest. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments because I love seeing where my stories reach. And if you've ever dealt with family who takes you for granted, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you want to hear more real stories about standing up for yourself. And buckle up because what comes next is going to make you question everything about family loyalty. Trust me, you won't believe how far my parents were willing to go. Growing up, I always knew my place in the family hierarchy. My younger brother Derek, who's 23 now, was the golden child from the moment he could walk. Everything he touched turned to excuses, and every failure was met with understanding and another chance. I, on the other hand, was the capable one. That word became a weapon they used against me my entire life. When Derek turned 16, our parents surprised him with a used Honda Civic at his birthday party. I remember watching him jump up and down, hugging Mom and Dad while they beamed with pride. 3 months later, Derek totaled that Civic driving drunk after a party. There were no consequences. Dad paid the fines, Mom cried, and said boys will be boys. And by his 17th birthday, Derek had another car. When I turned 16, I got a card with $50 in it and a pat on the back. Mom said, "You're so capable, Sloane. You'll figure out the car situation when you need to." So I did. I worked 2 part-time jobs through high school, saved every penny, and bought a beat-up Toyota when I was 17. I paid for my own insurance, my own gas, my own repairs. The pattern continued through college. I put myself through nursing school while living in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates and eating ramen most nights. I graduated with honors at 23, carrying student loans that would take me years to pay off. Derek's college experience was entirely different. Mom and Dad paid his tuition in full to a state university where he majored in business. He lasted 2 years before dropping out to find himself, which apparently involved backpacking through Europe on their dime for 6 months. When Derek came home, tanned and unemployed, they welcomed him with open arms and paid his rent while he figured out his next move. That next move never came. At 23, Derek had never held a job for longer than 4 months. He'd bounce from one opportunity to another, quitting when things got hard or when a boss expected him to actually work. Each time, Mom and Dad would shake their heads sadly, say the job wasn't right for him, and continue depositing money into his account. Meanwhile, I worked my way up from a floor nurse to a specialized position in the cardiac unit. I worked double shifts, holidays, weekends, whatever it took to prove myself and build a career. When I graduated nursing school, the family dinner celebration lasted about 20 minutes before the conversation shifted to Derek's newest idea for a business venture. Dad nodded along enthusiastically while Derek explained some cryptocurrency scheme he'd read about online. Nobody asked about my job prospects or my loan payments or how it felt to finally achieve something I'd worked so hard for. "I got a good job, sweetie," from Mom as she cleared the plates, and that was it. At 24, I finally saved enough to buy my Subaru Outback. It wasn't new, it had 70,000 miles on it, but it was mine. I paid cash, put my name on the title, and drove it off the lot with tears in my eyes. That car represented every early morning, every missed party, every sacrifice he'd made to not need them. It was proof that I could build a life without waiting for handouts or playing the helpless child. For 2 years, that Subaru was my pride and joy. I maintained it religiously, kept it clean, and never once asked my parents for help with it. And now they'd taken it like it was theirs to take. I borrowed my coworker Garrett's beat-up sedan and drove straight to my parents' house in the suburbs. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across their perfectly manicured lawn and the two-story colonial they'd bought when I was in middle school. My Subaru was parked right there in their driveway like it belonged to them, and I could see Derek's gym bag and fast food trash already cluttering the back seat. I didn't knock. I walked right in through the front door and found them all sitting around the dining room table, having dinner like nothing was wrong. The smell of Mom's pot roast filled the air, and they looked up at me with mild surprise, as if I was the one being dramatic by showing up unannounced. Derek was in the middle of telling some story, gesturing with his fork, while Dad listened and Mom smiled indulgently. They were the picture of a happy family, except for the fact that they'd stolen my car. I stood in the doorway and said, my voice shaking, "Where are my keys?" Dad, Walter, set down his glass of wine and looked at me with genuine confusion. Hez, a tall man with graying hair and the kind of voice that's used to being obeyed. He said, "Sloan, we left you a note on your door. Derek needed the car for his job interviews this week. We figured you wouldn't mind since you're always so understanding." Mom, Diane, reached over and patted my hand like I was a child who needed soothing. She's petite with blonde hair, she gets highlighted every 6 weeks, and she has this way of smiling that makes you feel like you're being unreasonable even when you're not. She said in her sweetest voice, "Sweetheart, you work right at the hospital. You can take the bus or catch a ride with a coworker. Derek needs to make good impressions at these interviews, and you know his old car finally died. We're just helping him get back on his feet." I pulled my hand away from hers and said slowly, trying to keep my voice level, "That is my car. I paid for it with my own money. My name is on the title. You can't just take it without asking me." The room went quiet for a moment, and then Walter sighed like I was exhausting him. He said, "Sloan, we're family. Family helps each other. You're being incredibly selfish right now. Your brother is trying to turn his life around, and you're going to stand in his way over a car." Diane nodded along, her eyes getting watery. She said, "We raised you better than this. We raised you to care about your family. Your brother needs this right now, and you have the means to manage without it for a few days. Why are you making this into such a big deal?" I turned to Derek, who'd been silent this whole time, just watching me with this smirk on his face. Has always looked like a younger version of Dad. Same build, same dark hair, same sense of entitlement. I said, "Derek, you have something to say." He shrugged and took another bite of pot roast. Then he said, his voice casual, "Come on, sis. It's just a car. You'll be fine. You always are." That phrase, "you always are," hit me like a slap. It was the summary of my entire childhood. The expectation that I'd always be fine, no matter what they did or didn't do for me. I said, my voice rising now, "I am not fine with you stealing my car. I'm not fine with you acting like my things are community property. I worked my ass off for that Subaru, and you have no right to it." Walter stood up then, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. He said, his voice getting stern, "Watch your language in this house, young lady. We did not steal anything. We borrowed it for a family member in need. If you can't understand that basic concept of family loyalty, then maybe we didn't raise you as well as we thought." Diane started crying quietly, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. She said, "I can't believe you'd speak to your father that way. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By refusing to help your brother when he needs it most." I felt like I was losing my mind. They'd taken my car without permission, and somehow I was the villain in this scenario. Derek just sat there, still smirking, completely silent while our parents fought his battle for him. I walked over to the key hook by the kitchen door where my parents have always kept spare keys, and I grabbed the spare set for my Subaru that had given them years ago for emergencies. Walter shouted, "Sloan, put those back right now." But I didn't stop. I walked out the front door with Mom following behind me, still crying, saying, "Please don't do this. Please. You're tearing this family apart." I got in my car, and the relief of sitting in my own driver's seat was overwhelming. Derek's trash was everywhere, and it smelled like stale French fries, but it was mine again. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway while my parents stood there in shock. Walter was yelling something about respect, and Diane had her hands over her mouth like I'd just committed murder. Derek had come to the door too, standing behind them with his arms crossed, and the look on his face wasn't anger. It was amusement, like this was all some entertaining show. I drove straight home, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. My phone started going off immediately. Text after text lit up my screen. Mom wrote, "How could you do this to your brother? He has interviews tomorrow and now no way to get there. You've ruined everything." Dad sent, "We are very disappointed in you, Sloan. Your selfishness is astounding." Derek's message simply said, "Real mature, Sloan. Hope you feel good about yourself." I pulled over into a parking lot and blocked all three of them. I couldn't handle reading another word. My heart was pounding, and I felt this strange mix of righteous anger and crippling guilt. Had I overreacted? Was I being selfish? These thoughts swirled in my head as I drove the rest of the way home. I didn't park in my apartment complex lot. Instead, I drove to my friend Ivy's place across town. She has a secured garage under her building, and I parked the Subaru there, taking the keys with me. Ivy took one look at my face and pulled me inside, made me tea, and listened to the whole story without interrupting once. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying the confrontation, wondering if I should have handled it differently, questioning whether family really did mean making sacrifices like they said. But morning brought something worse than guilt. I woke up to 53 notifications on my phone. I'd forgotten about the extended family group chat, the one my Aunt Linda had created years ago to coordinate holidays and share family photos. I opened it with dread, and my stomach dropped. The chat was exploding. My mother had sent a message late last night that said, "Please keep Derek in your prayers. Hez trying so hard to get his life together, but unfortunately not everyone in the family is willing to support him. Some people value material things over helping family in need." That was it. She didn't name me directly, but everyone knew. My Aunt Linda had responded, "Oh no, what happened?" And then the floodgates opened. Uncle Hank wrote, "Some young people today don't understand what family means. They get a little success and forget where they came from." Cousin Marla added, "Is this about Sloan? I heard she wouldn't let Derek borrow her car for job interviews. That's really cold." My grandmother, Phyllis, left a voicemail on my phone that I listened to with tears streaming down my face. She said in her frail, disappointed voice, "Sloan, honey, your mother told me what happened. I'm very disappointed in the young woman you've become. Family should come first, always. I hope you'll reconsider your selfishness and make this right." None of them knew the truth. None of them knew my parents had taken my car without asking, that they'd stolen my keys and acted like it was their right. My mother had framed it as me refusing to help, as me being unwilling to loan my car to Derek. The story had been completely twisted, and now the entire extended family thought I was a selfish monster who'd abandoned my brother in his time of need. I tried calling Aunt Linda to explain, but she didn't answer. I sent a message to the group chat explaining what actually happened, but it got lost in the flood of other messages, and only Ivy's sister, who was peripherally in the chat, responded with a heart emoji. Everyone else either didn't see it or chose to ignore it. My best friend Ivy told me to stand firm, that I'd done nothing wrong, that taking someone's car without permission is literally theft. But Garrett from work said maybe it wasn't worth all this family drama, that maybe I should have just let Derek use the car for a few days to keep the peace. I didn't know who was right anymore. A week later, Derek posted an Instagram story that made everything worse. It was him at a car dealership with our parents, standing next to a shiny used sedan. The caption read, "When you can't rely on family, you do it yourself. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for always having my back." The comments were full of support. People I didn't even know were writing things like, "Good for you, man," and "Family should support each other," and "Some siblings just don't get it." I felt sick. Had somehow turned himself into the victim and me into the villain, and our parents had helped him do it. Uncle Hank sent me a long email that evening. It was titled, "Thoughts on Family Values," and I almost deleted it without reading, but I couldn't help myself. He wrote about entitled millennials who think they're too good for their families, about how his generation understood sacrifice and loyalty, about how disappointing it was to see someone like me, who'd been given so many opportunities, refuse to help her own brother. He ended with, "I hope you'll reflect on your actions and make amends before it's too late." I drafted a response explaining the truth, but I deleted it. What was the point? They'd already decided who I was in this story. Over the next 3 days, the situation didn't calm down. It got worse. My parents took to Facebook, which they rarely used except for sharing recipes and photos of their garden. Mom posted a vague status that said, "When your child forgets the values you raised them with, it breaks your heart," praying for understanding and compassion. It got 43 likes and dozens of comments from their friends, people from their church, neighbors I'd known growing up. They all wrote supportive messages like, "Hang in there, Diane." And kids these days don't appreciate their parents. "And you're such a good mother. This must be so hard." Nobody knew what she was talking about specifically, but the implication was clear. I was the bad child who'd hurt my poor, devoted parents. Dad didn't post anything, but he shared Mom's status with a sad face emoji. The extended family continued their assault. Cousin Marla called me directly, and I actually answered, hoping to explain. She said, "Sloan, I just don't understand. Your parents have done so much for you over the years. You really couldn't loan Derek your car for a few days." I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "Marla, they didn't ask to borrow it. They took it. They took my keys and gave my car to Derek without my permission. That's not borrowing." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "But you got it back, didn't you? So what's the big deal? Why are you being so vindictive about this? Derek really needed help, and you made everything about you." I realized then that nothing I said would matter. The story had been set. I was selfish. Derek was the struggling victim, and my parents were the heartbroken casualties of my cruelty. I tried explaining to Marla that it was the principle, that you can't just take people's property, that my car represented years of work and sacrifice. She sighed and said, "Sometimes family is more important than principles, Sloan. Maybe you'll understand that when you're older." I was 26 years old, working a demanding job, living independently, and she was talking to me like I was a teenager having a tantrum. I ended the call feeling more alone than ever. Grandma Phyllis left another voicemail. This one was shorter but cut deeper. She said, "I raised your mother to value family above all else. I thought she'd pass those values on to you. I see now that I was wrong. I won't be calling again until you apologize to your parents and brother. I'm too old to watch this family fall apart because of stubbornness." The message ended with a click, and I sat there staring at my phone, feeling like it'd been punched in the stomach. My grandmother, who used to bake me cookies every Sunday and braid my hair, had just cut me off. Ivy kept telling me I was right to stand my ground. She'd say, "They're gaslighting you, Sloan. They're making you question reality. You know what happened. Don't let them rewrite history." But Garrett at work kept pushing back. He'd say things like, "Is this really the hill you want to die on? It's just a car. You have it back now. Maybe apologize and move on so you can have your family back." I started questioning everything. Maybe I was being too rigid. Maybe family did mean making sacrifices, even when it hurt. Maybe I should have just let it go. But every time I started to think that way, I'd remember the smirk on Derek's face, the entitlement in my father's voice, the manipulation in my mother's tears. They'd stolen from me and then convinced everyone I was the thief. Uncle Hank sent a follow-up email with an article attached about the importance of family bonds and how modern society was destroying traditional values. I didn't read past the first paragraph. Derek posted more on social media. Photos of him and Kelsey, his new girlfriend, at expensive restaurants. Pictures of weekend trips to the coast. All of it funded by our parents while he supposedly couldn't afford a car and desperately needed mine. Kelsey looked like money. Her photos showed a large house, a pool, parents who owned some kind of business. I could see what was happening. Derek was trying to impress her, trying to look more successful than he was, and he needed the props to do it. My Subaru would have been part of that performance. A reliable car to drive her around in, to park at her parents' house, to maintain the illusion that he had his life together. I felt validated but also angrier. It'd been demonized by my entire family so my brother could put on a show for a girl. That's what I was worth to them. A supporting character in Derek's endless performance of potential. A week later, I was grabbing coffee at my usual place before a shift when I ran into Paige, Derek's ex-girlfriend from 2 years ago. I'd always liked Paige. She was smart, studying to be a veterinarian, way too good for my brother. They dated for about 18 months before she finally had enough of his nonsense and left. I hadn't seen her since the breakup. She was sitting alone at a corner table, and when she saw me, her expression shifted to something between sympathy and anger. She waved me over, and I almost pretended I didn't see her, but something made me walk to her table. She said, "Sloan, I heard about what happened with your car. I'm so sorry your family is treating you like that." I was surprised. I said, "How did you hear about it?" She rolled her eyes and said, "Derek's been posting about it online, playing the victim. I still have mutual friends with him, and they've been talking. Can I tell you something? You deserve to know the truth." My heart started racing. I sat down across from her, and she leaned in like she was sharing a secret. Paige said, "Derek's job interviews? They were bullshit. There were no job interviews, Sloan. He wanted your car to impress Kelsey. Her family is loaded, and they're really judgmental about appearances and success. Derek needed a nice car to drive her around in because his old beater finally died, and he was embarrassed. That's the only reason he wanted your Subaru. The whole job interview story was a lie, he told your parents, and they either believed him or didn't care enough to question it." I felt my face go hot. I said, "How do you know this?" Paige pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots of messages between her and a mutual friend who still hung out with Derek. The friend had mentioned Derek complaining about needing a car to keep up with Kelsey's expectations. There was even a message where Derek admitted he made up the interview story because he knew his parents would help him if they thought he was trying to get a job. Paige said, "Has been unemployed for 8 months, Sloan. There's no job search. Your parents are still paying his rent, his phone bill, everything. They know it too. They just keep enabling him." She showed me Derek's Instagram, scrolling through photos I'd already seen but now with context. Derek and Kelsey at a fancy steakhouse. The caption read, "Celebrating good things coming." Paige said, "That dinner cost $200. Your mom paid for it." I know because Derek told our mutual friend he couldn't wait to use his mom's credit card for once since Kelsey expected him to pay. I felt sick. Every assumption I'd had was confirmed. My family had stolen my car, launched a smear campaign against me, convinced the entire extended family I was a selfish monster. Also, Derek could impress a girl. There was no job. There was no self-improvement. It was just Derek doing what Derek always did, using people and resources to maintain an image while doing nothing to actually better himself. Paige said bitterly, "Your parents enable everything. Has never going to grow up as long as they keep rescuing him. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of it. You deserve better." We talked for another 20 minutes. She told me about the final straw that ended her relationship with Derek. How Head borrowed money from her repeatedly, promised to pay it back, and never did. How Head lied about job prospects and plans for the future, and she finally realized he had no intention of ever changing. She said, "The sad part is, Derek could actually be successful if he tried. He's smart when he wants to be. But why would he try when everything gets handed to him?" After Paige left, I sat in that coffee shop for an hour, letting her words sink in. I pulled out my phone and started taking screenshots of Derek's social media posts. The expensive dinners, the trips, the lifestyle that didn't match someone desperately trying to find work. I saved Paige's contact information and asked her if she'd be willing to share those message screenshots with me if I ever needed them. She said yes immediately. She said, "Burn it all down, Sloan. They deserve it." I didn't know if I would use any of this information, but having it felt like having power. Ivy called me that afternoon, and I told her everything Paige had said. Ivy's response was immediate and fierce. She said, "You need to expose this. You need to tell your family the truth with proof. They're crucifying you over a lie." But I hesitated. Part of me wanted to let it go, to walk away from all of them and build a life without the constant drama. Another part of me, the angry part that had been suppressed my entire life, wanted them to know exactly what they'd done. I wanted my parents to face the fact that they'd chosen a lie over their own daughter. I wanted Derek to be held accountable for once in his privileged life. I saved all the evidence and waited. I didn't know when I'd use it, but I knew the moment would come. 2 months passed. The family group chat had gone quiet, at least regarding me. Life returned to a strange new normal, where I simply didn't exist to most of my extended family. I threw myself into work, picked up extra shifts, and tried not to think about the relationships I'd lost. Then October arrived, and with it came the annual Thanksgiving planning messages. Aunt Linda posted in the group chat asking who was bringing what dishes and confirming everyone would be at my parents' house like always. I wasn't mentioned. I wasn't included in the planning. It was like I'd been erased. Then, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, my phone rang. It was Grandma Phyllis. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Her voice was softer than the last time, less angry, more tired. She said, "Sloan, honey, it's Thanksgiving. I know there's been tension, but family is forever. Whatever disagreement you had with your parents and Derek, it's time to put it aside. Life is too short for this kind of division. Will you come to dinner?" For me, I wanted to say no. Every part of me screamed to protect myself from more hurt. But this was my grandmother, the woman who'd raised my mother, who'd been a constant in my life for 26 years. I heard myself saying, "I'll come." But in bringing my friend Ivy, Grandma Phyllis agreed quickly, just happy I'd said yes. Thanksgiving Day arrived cold and gray. Ivy drove because I didn't trust myself to stay calm behind the wheel. She wore a green sweater and kept saying, "If it gets bad, we leave. Just give me the signal." We pulled up to my parents' house at 2 in the afternoon, right when dinner was being served. Cars lined the street. The whole family was there. Uncle Hank's truck, Aunt Linda's van, Cousin Marla's sedan, and right in front, parked in the best spot, was Derek's new used car that my parents had bought him. Ivy squeezed my hand as we walked to the front door. I didn't knock. We walked in, and the noise of conversation stopped like someone had pressed pause. My mother was in the kitchen doorway wearing her apron. My father was carving the turkey. Derek was on the couch with a beautiful blonde girl who had to be Kelsey. She looked exactly like her Instagram photos. Perfect makeup, expensive clothes, the kind of girl who'd never had to work for anything in her life. Everyone stared at us. Aunt Linda broke the silence with a forced smile, saying, "Sloan, you came. How wonderful!" The tone suggested it wasn't wonderful at all. We sat down at the kids' table, even though I was 26 and Ivy was 27. The kids' table had been set up in the living room because the main dining table was full. Nobody moved to make room for us. Cousin Marla's teenage sons sat with us, scrolling on their phones, not interested in the family drama. Dinner was uncomfortable from the start. My mother brought out dishes one by one, and each time she passed our table, Shed smiled tightly without making eye contact. My father said grace, thanking God for family and togetherness and blessings, and I felt Ivy's leg press against mine under the table in solidarity. Derek and Kelsey sat at the main table, treated like royalty. My parents kept asking Kelsey questions about her family's business, about her college experience, about her plans for the future. They hung on her every word. Diane said, "Kelsey, Derek speaks so highly of you. It's wonderful to see him with someone who brings out the best in him." Walter added, "Derek's really grown up this past year. We're very proud of the man he's becoming." I almost choked on my mashed potatoes. The man he's becoming? He was still unemployed, still living off their money, still lying about job prospects. But with Kelsey there, They were performing, playing the role of proud parents with a successful son. Then the passive-aggressive comments started. Diane said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Kelsey, Derek is so thoughtful. He always thinks of others. Not everyone in this family has that quality, but Derek certainly does." Walter nodded, saying, "We raised both our kids with the same values. It's interesting how differently they turned out. Some people embrace family loyalty, and others, well, they choose a different path." I gripped my fork so hard my knuckles turned white. Ivy whispered, "Do you want to leave?" But I shook my head. It'd come this far. I wasn't running. Uncle Hank joined in from across the room, saying, "Young people today are so focused on themselves. In my day, we understood sacrifice. We understood putting family first." Aunt Linda tried to change the subject, asking about someone's new job, but the damage was done. I sat there eating in silence, letting their words wash over me, refusing to react. Then Kelsey, sweet, innocent Kelsey, who had no idea what she was walking into, said with genuine curiosity, "So Sloan, I heard you and Derek had some car drama a while back. What was that about?" The entire room went silent. Every conversation stopped. Everyone turned to look at me. I could feel my mother's panic from across the room. Diane jumped in immediately, her voice bright and fake. "Oh, that was just a little misunderstanding, Kelsey. Nothing important. Sloan overreacted to a family favor, but it's all water under the bridge now." I set down my fork carefully. I looked at my mother and said, my voice calm and clear, "I overreacted when you stole my car." Walter's face went red. He said sharply, "We did not steal anything. We borrowed it for your brother. There's a difference." I turned to face the main table, looking directly at Derek and Kelsey. I said, "Without asking, without permission, you took my keys and gave my car to Derek. That's called theft, Dad." Derek's expression shifted from smug to panicked. He said, "God, Sloan, are you seriously still on about this? It was months ago. Let it go." I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. I said, "How did those job interviews go, Derek? The ones you needed my car for? Did you get any offers?" He went pale. Kelsey looked at him, confused. She said, "Job interviews? I thought you said your sister just didn't want to help you out." I pulled out my phone. It'd saved everything Paige had shared with me, and it'd been carrying it like a loaded weapon, waiting for this exact moment. I said, "That's interesting, because there were no job interviews. Derek needed my car to impress you, Kelsey. His old car died, and he was embarrassed. So he lied to our parents about job hunting. They stole my car. And then they launched a family-wide campaign to make me look like the villain when I took it back." Chaos erupted. Derek stood up, shouting, "That's bullshit, Sloan. You're making things up because you're bitter." My mother started crying, real tears this time. My father slammed his hand on the table, making dishes rattle, saying, "How dare you come into our home and spread lies on Thanksgiving?" But I didn't stop. I held up my phone and said, "I have screenshots. Messages from Derek's friends confirming he lied about the interviews. Photos of him spending hundreds of dollars at restaurants while claiming he couldn't afford a car. Bank records showing Mom and Dad pay all his bills. This isn't a lie. This is the truth you all chose to ignore." Grandma Phyllis, who'd been silent until now, said in a voice that cut through the noise, "Walter, Diane, is this true?" My parents looked at each other. My father said, "Derek might have exaggerated about the interviews. But that doesn't excuse Sloane's selfishness. She still should have helped him without being asked." Grandma Phyllis stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. She said, "You lied to me. You lied to this entire family. You made me believe Sloane was cruel when she was the victim. I'm ashamed of you." Half the family started talking at once. Aunt Linda was asking questions. Uncle Hank was defending my parents. Cousin Marla looked shocked. And Kelsey was staring at Derek like she was seeing him for the first time. Derek grabbed his jacket and said, "I don't have to sit here and take this." He stormed out, and Kelsey hesitated for only a moment before following him. I heard their voices outside, Kelsey saying, "You lied to me about everything. and Derek responding with excuses I couldn't make out. Ivy touched my arm and said quietly, "Time to go." We stood up, and I looked at my parents one last time. Diane was crying into her napkin, and Walter was staring at his plate, his jaw tight. I said, "I came today because Grandma asked me to." I tried to let this go. "But you couldn't even make it through one meal without attacking me. So here's the truth, laid out for everyone to see. What you do with it is up to you." We walked out. Behind us, I could hear Grandma Phyllis' voice rising, demanding answers, and Aunt Linda saying something about always thinking Derek was spoiled. The family was fracturing in real time, and I'd been the one to light the match. As Ivy drove us away from that house, I waited to feel guilty, but all I felt was tired. Thanksgiving ended in complete disaster, with half the family leaving early and the other half staying to argue. Ivy told me later that Shed heard through her sister, who was still in the extended family group chat, that the fighting had continued for hours after we left. Grandma Phyllis had cornered my parents and demanded the full truth. Walter and Diane apparently admitted that Derek had exaggerated about the job interviews but insisted that Sloane was still in the wrong for making such a big deal over a car. Grandma Phyllis, according to the reports, had been furious. Shed said something like, "You lied to me. You made me cut off my granddaughter based on lies. I will not forgive this easily." Aunt Linda had wavered too, saying she wished Shed known the real story before judging me so harshly. But Uncle Hank had doubled down, arguing that even if Derek lied, family still meant making sacrifices, and I should have just let it go instead of airing dirty laundry in front of everyone. Cousin Marla apparently left without saying goodbye to anyone, too shocked by the revelations to know whose side to take. The days following Thanksgiving brought a new wave of attacks, but this time they were more desperate. My mother sent me a text at 2 a.m. that read, "You humiliated us in front of the entire family. You stood up at our table and destroyed us. I hope you're proud of yourself. I hope this is what you wanted." My father's message came the next morning, formal and cold. "Sloane, your behavior on Thanksgiving was inexcusable. You have damaged relationships that may never be repaired. Your mother is devastated. I am disappointed beyond words. Do not contact us until you're ready to apologize for what you've done." Derek's text was shorter and meaner. It just said, "You're dead to me. Enjoy your sad little life." I didn't respond to any of them. What was there to say? I'd told the truth, and they'd rather attack me than accept responsibility. But not everyone stayed silent. Cousin Marla reached out 3 days after Thanksgiving with an apology. She called me, her voice hesitant, and said, "Sloane, I owe you an apology. I didn't know they actually took your car without asking. Your mom made it sound like you just refused to help Derek. I said some really unfair things about you, and I'm sorry. I should have asked for your side of the story before judging you." Her apology felt genuine, and I accepted it. We talked for over an hour, and she admitted Shed always noticed how differently our parents treated Derek versus me but had assumed it wasn't her place to say anything. Aunt Linda sent me an email a week later. The subject line was, "I'm sorry," and the message was long and heartfelt. She wrote that Shed spent years watching my parents baby Derek and take me for granted. She wrote that Shed tried to say something once, years ago, and my mother had frozen her out for months, so Shed learned to stay quiet. She wrote that she regretted not standing up for me sooner, and that she understood if I didn't want a relationship with her anymore, but hoped I'd consider forgiving her. I responded, thanking her for the apology, and telling her I didn't blame her for staying out of it. I wrote that I hoped we could rebuild our relationship slowly. Some family members reached out privately to say they believed me, that they'd had their own suspicions about Derek's story but hadn't wanted to cause drama. Others doubled down. Uncle Hank sent me another long email about loyalty and respect, about how I'd ruined Thanksgiving for everyone and should be ashamed. His wife, Aunt Carol, sent a separate message saying I was selfish and cruel for embarrassing my parents publicly. I deleted their emails without responding. There was no point in engaging with people who'd already made up their minds. Through it all, Ivy was my rock. She'd check in daily, bring me food when I was too exhausted to cook after shifts, and remind me that I'd done the right thing. She'd say, They're attacking you because you exposed them. People hate being held accountable. My coworker Garrett, surprisingly, changed his tune after I told him what happened at Thanksgiving. He said, "Okay, I was wrong. Your family is toxic. I'm sorry I suggested you compromise with them." Even some of my other coworkers, who'd heard bits and pieces of the story, went out of their way to support me. One of the older nurses, a woman named Brenda who'd worked in the cardiac unit for 30 years, pulled me aside one day and said, "I cut off my toxic family 20 years ago. Best decision I ever made. Don't let guilt drag you back into dysfunction." Her words meant more than she knew. I started seeing a therapist, something I'd been putting off for years. In our first session, I told her the whole story from beginning to end. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "It sounds like you were parentified as a child. You were expected to be the adult while your brother remained the child. Your accomplishments were minimized because they highlighted his failures." The word capable became a weapon to justify neglect. Hearing it laid out like that, in clinical terms, made something click in my brain. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. It'd been set up to fail emotionally my entire life. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, on a cold Tuesday morning in December, I received a certified letter at my apartment. I signed for it, confused about who would send me something requiring a signature, and opened it standing in my kitchen. The letterhead read Morrison and Associates, attorneys at law. My hands started shaking before I even read the first line. The letter stated that Walter and Diane Hayes, my parents, were filing a lawsuit against me for emotional distress and defamation. They claimed that my statements at Thanksgiving dinner constituted slander, that I had knowingly spread false information to damage their reputation within the family and community, and that this had caused them severe emotional suffering. They were suing me for $25,000 in damages. I read the letter 3 times, each time feeling more surreal. My parents were actually suing me, their own daughter, for telling the truth. The letter went on to demand that I issue a public apology to them, and Derek retract my statements and cease all contact with extended family members to stop spreading malicious lies. If I didn't comply within 30 days, they'd proceed with the lawsuit. I called Ivy immediately, my voice shaking so badly I could hardly speak. She came over within 20 minutes, read the letter, and said, "This is insane. They're trying to intimidate you into silence." I contacted a lawyer that afternoon, a woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in family law. I explained the situation, sent her copies of everything, the letter, my evidence about Derek's lies, the screenshots from Paige, my car title showing ownership. Patricia read through everything carefully during our consultation, and then she looked up at me and said, "This lawsuit is frivolous. They have no case. But defending against it will cost you money and time, which is exactly what they're counting on. They're banking on you being scared enough to back down and apologize." I asked her what my options were. She said, "You could ignore it and let them try to proceed, but I wouldn't recommend that. You could settle and give them what they want, which I definitely don't recommend. Or you could fight back. You have grounds for a countersuit. They took your car without permission, which is theft. You have documentation proving everything you said at Thanksgiving was true, which means you can't be guilty of defamation. And if you want to get really aggressive, you could file for a restraining order based on harassment." I sat in Patricia's office for a long time, thinking about what fighting back would mean. It would make the situation so much worse. It would cement the family divide permanently. There would be no going back from suing my own parents. But then I thought about everything they'd done. They'd stolen from me. They'd gaslit me. They'd turned my entire family against me with lies. They'd ruined my reputation, and now they were trying to legally punish me for defending myself. They'd pushed and pushed, assuming I'd always back down because I was the capable one, the one who kept the peace, the one who absorbed their dysfunction without complaint. But I was done being that person. I looked at Patricia and said, "I want to fight back. File the countersuit. File the restraining order. I'm done protecting them." Patricia smiled, a fierce expression that told me she'd been hoping I'd say that. She said, "Good. Let's burn this down." Over the next week, Patricia prepared everything. She filed a countersuit against my parents for theft of property, citing the car incident with all my documentation. She filed harassment claims based on the lawsuit and their campaign to damage my reputation. And she helped me draft a detailed email to my entire extended family, laying out the truth with evidence. The email was long, methodical, and devastating. I started with the timeline of events, from the day my car was taken to the Thanksgiving confrontation. I included screenshots of my parents' texts, Derek's social media posts showing his expensive lifestyle while claiming poverty, Peggy's testimony about the fake job interviews, and bank records that Aunt Linda had quietly provided showing my parents had been supporting Derek financially for years while he contributed nothing. I included copies of the lawsuit they'd filed against me, highlighting the absurdity of parents suing their daughter for telling the truth. The subject line was simple: setting the record straight. I sent it to everyone: Grandma Phyllis, Aunt Linda, Uncle Hank, Aunt Carol, Cousin Marla, distant cousins I barely knew, family, friends, everyone in that group chat and beyond. Then I waited. The response was immediate and explosive. My phone started ringing within minutes. Grandma Phyllis called first, and I answered. Her voice was shaking with fury, but not at me. She said, "They're suing you? Their own child? Sloan, I am so sorry. I should have seen this years ago. I should have protected you from them." She told me Shed already called my parents and told them she was ashamed to call them her family. Aunt Linda called next, crying, saying she couldn't believe it had gone this far. She said she'd been talking to Uncle Hank, and even he was starting to question my parents' behavior, though he wasn't ready to admit had been wrong yet. Cousin Marla sent a long message of support, saying she'd be willing to testify on my behalf if needed. Several family members cut contact with my parents immediately. Grandma Phyllis announced in the family group chat that she would not be attending any family functions hosted by Walter and Diane until they learned how to treat their daughter with basic human decency. Aunt Linda backed her up. The family fractured along clear lines. Some relatives, the ones who'd seen the dysfunction for years, sided with me. Others, the ones who valued peace over truth, begged everyone to just reconcile and move on. Uncle Hank sent a message saying, "This has gone too far on both sides. Everyone needs to apologize and move forward." But I was done apologizing for their mistakes. 3 days after I sent the email, Derek's relationship with Kelsey ended. Ivy's sister, still lurking in peripheral social circles, reported that Kelsey had finally learned the full extent of Derek's lies and unemployment and had dumped him publicly at a coffee shop. Derek, according to reports, had blamed me for ruining his relationship. He posted a vague status about toxic family members destroying good things, but the comments were less sympathetic this time. People were starting to see through his victim narrative. My parents withdrew their lawsuit a week before the 30-day deadline. Patricia called me with the news, saying their lawyer had probably advised them they'd lose and might face sanctions for filing a frivolous suit. But there was no apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just a legal withdrawal. The damage, though, was permanent. My family was shattered. Thanksgiving the following year would have 2 separate dinners, one hosted by Grandma Phyllis for the relatives who supported me, and one at my parents' house for the handful who still sided with them. I would never speak to my parents or Derek again. That bridge wasn't just burned, it was demolished, and I'd been the one holding the match. Some nights I felt grief for the family I'd wished I had. Other nights I felt nothing but relief that I was finally free from their toxicity. Ivy asked me once if I regretted exposing everything. I thought about it for a long time before answering. Finally, I said, "I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret doing it." That felt true. Months passed after the lawsuit was withdrawn, and I settled into a strange new normal. Going no contact with my parents and Derek was harder than I expected, not because I missed them, but because I mourned who I'd thought they were. Therapy became a weekly ritual. My therapist, Dr. Mendoza, helped me process years of being the capable one, the child who was expected to function as an adult while Derek remained perpetually adolescent. She used the term parentified, explaining that I'd been given adult responsibilities and emotional burdens from a young age while my needs were ignored. She said, "Your accomplishments were minimized because they highlighted Derek's failures. Your parents needed you to stay small so Derek didn't look so incompetent by comparison." The word capable wasn't a compliment, it was manipulation. It was their way of justifying neglect. Hearing it explained in clinical terms helped me understand that I wasn't defective or ungrateful. It'd been set up in a rigged system designed to benefit Derek at my expense. Dr. Mendoza also helped me recognize the grief I felt wasn't for the family I'd lost, but for the family I'd never actually had. I grieved the parents who should have been proud of me, who should have celebrated my accomplishments, who should have protected me instead of sacrificing me for their golden child. That grief was real and valid, but it wasn't about them anymore. It was about accepting reality and letting go of fantasy. Some days were harder than others. I'd see a father and daughter at the hospital, laughing together, and feel a sharp pain in my chest. I'd watch holiday movies about families reconciling and feel anger that real life wasn't that simple. But slowly, the pain dulled. I started to feel lighter, freer, unburdened by the constant effort of managing their dysfunction and protecting their feelings while mine were trampled. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I wasn't bracing for the next crisis or the next demand. I was just living my life without their chaos, bleeding into every corner. Work became a source of pride and purpose. 6 months after going no contact, I was promoted to charge nurse in the cardiac unit, a position I'd been working toward for years. My supervisor, Karen, pulled me aside after announcing the promotion and said, "You've always been capable, Sloan, but this past year you've been exceptional. Whatever you're doing differently, keep doing it." I almost laughed at the word capable, but this time it felt different. This time it was genuine recognition, not a manipulation tactic. I threw myself into the new role, mentoring younger nurses, improving protocols, and finding satisfaction in work that mattered. The money was better too. I started saving aggressively, and by the end of the year, I'd built up an emergency fund and paid off a chunk of my student loans. The financial independence felt powerful. I took a trip to Iceland with Ivy that fall, something I'd dreamed about for years but never prioritized, because I was always managing family drama or helping with some crisis Derek had created. We spent 10 days hiking glaciers, soaking in hot springs, and watching the northern lights. It was the first vacation I'd taken as an adult where I wasn't checking my phone constantly, waiting for the next family emergency. I posted photos online, and the comments were all supportive. Grandma Phyllis commented, "You deserve this, sweetheart." Aunt Linda wrote, "So proud of you." Even cousin Marla chimed in with heart emojis. I also started dating again. I'd been so consumed by family drama that I'd barely had time for relationships. Then I met Finn at a community event the hospital hosted for first responders. He was a paramedic, tall with red hair and an easy laugh that made me feel comfortable immediately. We started talking, and I learned he came from a large, functional family that actually liked each other. The first time he invited me to his parents' house for Sunday dinner, I was terrified. But his family was warm and welcoming. His mother, Margaret, hugged me at the door like we'd known each other for years. His father, Tom, asked about my work with genuine interest. His 3 siblings teased each other but with affection, not cruelty. Watching them interact was surreal. This was what a healthy family looked like. They didn't keep score. They didn't play favorites. They didn't weaponize love and support. After that first dinner, I sat in Finn's car and cried. He held my hand and asked what was wrong. I said, "Nothing's wrong. This is just so different from what I grew up with. I didn't know families could actually be like this." He kissed my forehead and said, "You deserve this kind of family, Sloan. You always did." Some extended family maintained contact with me. Grandma Phyllis called every Sunday, and we'd talk for an hour about everything and nothing. She never pressured me to reconcile with my parents. In fact, she'd stopped speaking to them entirely after they withdrew the lawsuit without apologizing. She told me once, "I love your mother, but I don't like what she's become. She chose enabling Derek over protecting you, and I can't forgive that. Aunt Linda and I met for lunch once a month. She'd give me updates on family drama, always careful to ask if I wanted to hear it first. Apparently, my parents' financial situation was deteriorating. Walter's small business was struggling, and Diane's inheritance from her parents was almost depleted from years of supporting Derek. Aunt Linda said they'd asked Derek to get a job and contribute to household expenses, and had thrown a tantrum, threatening to move out. They'd back down immediately. Cousin Marla stayed in touch through social media, liking my posts and sending encouraging messages. But others I let go. Uncle Hank never apologized, so I blocked him on everything. Aunt Carol sent a passive-aggressive Christmas card about forgiveness, which I threw away without responding. Several distant cousins who'd sided with my parents simply faded from my life, and I didn't chase them. I learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, reciprocity, and care. The people who stayed in my life after the fallout were the ones who actually valued me. Derek's life, from what I heard through the grapevine, spiraled predictably. He was 25 now and still living with our parents, still unemployed, still blaming everyone else for his problems. Grandma Phyllis told me that some relatives had tried staging an intervention, sitting my parents down and explaining that they were ruining Derek by enabling him. My parents had refused to listen, insisting Derek just needed time to find his path. Walter's business eventually closed, unable to compete in a changing market. Diane had to get a part-time job at a local boutique to supplement their income. Derek demanded they refinance the house to support him, and when they explained they couldn't afford to, he apparently raged at them for hours, calling them failures as parents. The irony was almost funny. The son they'd sacrificed everything for now resented them for not having more to give. Derek's social media had become a parade of self-pity and blame. He posted vague statuses about being held back by circumstances, about people not understanding his potential, about the world being rigged against him. The comments were fewer now. People were tired of his victim narrative. I felt distant pity when I heard about his struggles, but no guilt. I hadn't caused his failures. My parents' enabling had. They'd taught him that effort was optional, that consequences were for other people, that he deserved success without work. Now he was paying the price, and so were they. Reflecting on everything a year after that disastrous Thanksgiving, I realized standing up to my parents was both the hardest and most important thing I'd ever done. It cost me relationships I'd thought were essential. It brought conflict and pain and legal threats. But it also freed me from a lifetime of being the family doormat. I'd learned brutal lessons about boundaries, about the difference between being strong and being a doormat, about how people who truly love you don't steal from you and then gaslight you about it. I learned that you can't logic someone out of a position they didn't logic themselves into, that sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing their game, and that chosen family is just as valid as blood family. I started mentoring younger nurses who came from difficult family situations. I'd recognize the signs, the guilt, the people-pleasing, the inability to set boundaries. I'd pull them aside and share my story. Not for pity, but to show them it was possible to break free. One young nurse named Tasha told me, "You helped me realize I don't owe my family my mental health just because they're family." That meant everything. I also learned that healing isn't linear. Some days I'd feel completely free, unburdened by the past. Other days I'd see a father walking his daughter down a hospital corridor, his arm around her shoulders, and I'd feel that sharp stab of loss. I'd wonder what it would have been like to have parents who were actually proud of me, who celebrated my successes instead of minimizing them, who protected me instead of sacrificing me. Those moments of grief were real. And Dr. Mendoza taught me to sit with them instead of pushing them away. She said, "Grief means you're human. It means you wanted something beautiful that you deserved but didn't receive. That's not weakness. That's proof you still have hope for what love should look like." So I let myself grieve. I let myself be angry. I let myself feel all of it without judgment. And eventually, the feelings would pass, and I'd return to my new life, the one I'd built without them. Now, 3 years after that terrible Thanksgiving, I sat in my Subaru Outback, still running strong despite having over 100,000 miles on it. The car that had started everything. I was driving to Finn's family house for their Thanksgiving celebration. Margaret had texted me that morning asking what time Eid arrive and whether I was bringing my famous pumpkin pie. It felt such warmth reading that message. This was what family should feel like. Inclusion, not obligation. Celebration, not manipulation. My phone buzzed at a red light. I glanced down and saw a missed call from a number I hadn't seen in 18 months. Mom. My heart rate spiked automatically, that old conditioned response. There was a voicemail. I almost deleted it without listening, but curiosity won. I pulled into a parking lot and pressed play. My mother's voice filled the car, and it sounded older, tired. She said, "Sloan, it's Mom. Your father and I have been talking, and we think enough time has passed. Derek would like to apologize for everything that happened. We'd really like you to come to Christmas this year. It's time to put all this unpleasantness behind us and be a family again. Call me back when you get this." I listened to it twice. There was no acknowledgement of what they'd done, no real apology, no acceptance of responsibility. Just enough time has passed, as if time alone healed wounds they'd inflicted and never addressed. Just Derek would like to apologize. As if his half-hearted sorry would erase years of entitlement and cruelty. Just put this behind us, as if I was the one holding a grudge instead of protecting myself from people who'd proven they'd hurt me again given the chance. I sat there in my car, phone in hand, and realized something profound. I used to think I needed their approval to feel complete. I used to believe that without my family, even a toxic one, I was somehow less than whole. But sitting there, about to drive to a Thanksgiving celebration with people who actually cared about me, who respected me, who celebrated me instead of diminishing me, I knew the truth. It'd always been complete. They'd needed me more than I needed them. They'd needed someone to absorb their dysfunction, to enable Derek's helplessness, to play the role of the capable one so they could pretend their family was functional. But I didn't need to teach them that lesson. Some people never learn. And that wasn't my problem anymore. I deleted the voicemail without responding. I blocked my mother's number, something I should have done months ago. Then I turned the music up. Fleetwood Mac's Go Your Own Way, playing through the speakers, and I merged back onto the highway. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink, and the road ahead was clear. I was driving toward the family I'd chosen, the one that chose me back. The people who loved me for who I was instead of who they needed me to be. For the first time in my entire life, I felt completely, utterly free. The weight of their expectations, their manipulation, their endless drama had lifted. I was just Sloan now. Not the capable one, not the scapegoat, not the family fixer. Just me. And that was enough. That was more than enough. I pressed the gas pedal and drove faster, leaving the past behind with every mile, heading toward a future I was building on my own terms. The future was mine, and it was beautiful. So tell me, have you ever had to cut off toxic family members to protect yourself? Have you been the scapegoat or the golden child in your family? Drop your stories in the comments below because I know I'm not alone in this. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real talk about setting boundaries and choosing yourself. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that it's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this community. Remember, you are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You deserve respect, love, and peace. I wish you all the strength to protect your boundaries and the courage to build the life you deserve. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.